the thing that makes The Office great is that these people are a legal train wreck.
No question. Yeah, I'm sorry in advance. I'm going to take all the fun out of this show for anybody who had blinders on and missed all the HR issues and everything else.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Doug Defends. If you're in the States, happy Labor Day. And, of course, this is the show where a real lawyer talks about fake things. I am Billy Business, and you are Mr. Doug Ridley.
And I'm ready for The Office today.
I mean, Labor Day, the workforce, this felt like the right show to do, right?
I think you're brilliant, as always. And
so
now it's on video.
Now we have it recorded.
We do.
So
you can just loop that back in when I start making fun of you later.
I'm just going to have it as a soundbite like an FM DJ. Well, because you're brilliant. So today we're going to be talking Bears, Beats, bald-headed lawyers, and everything in between. We're talking The Office, and you know what's interesting? Going back, The Office premiered in March of 2005. It was a mid-season replacement. Obviously, it was a remake of the British Office with Ricky Gervais. By season 2, they kind of diverted and started to make it their own show, do their own thing. This show, oddly enough, you're going to be like, what? This show has more in common with, say, the Brady Bunch than it does maybe something like Seinfeld or Friends, in the sense that this was never a huge ratings monster when it came out. It was always a show that performed very well. It was a very hot lead-in for other shows. This was the one that they would put on the Thursday must-see at 9. But it was never like the number one show. It really wasn't until later on, after the show was over and it was on Netflix, and then during the pandemic, where this show just exploded in popularity, has now become, I think it's even transcended the label of like cult classic. It is just now classic TV.
Yeah. And I think this has the Friends phenomenon, which if you turn on TBS almost any hour of the day, not TBS is a station that you would actually go to that has regular programming that's not a streaming service. But yeah, I mean, you could almost watch The Office anytime, and now I feel even more old.
Well, it's between like Comedy Central, TBS. I think even Nick at Night got in on that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So this was definitely the other thing about The Office that's very interesting is that while it wasn't the first to ever do it, this really kind of popularized the single cam, no laugh track, the talking heads. And after this became a hit, like we started to see a lot more. We saw Parks and Rec, even all the way to like Modern Family, which was kind of duplicating the same kind of thing. So The Office in a lot of ways has become, just like synonymous with a lot of pop culture things, where it might be one of those things where people maybe even haven't watched it very much, but they know a lot of the jokes because they've been parodied or just shown so much. But the thing that makes The Office great is that these people are a legal train wreck.
No question. No question. I mean, I've watched it all the way through probably twice at this point. I watched it all the way through, almost all the way through live. But I've rewatched it, a couple of times. But yeah, I'm sorry in advance. I'm going to take all the fun out of this show for anybody who had blinders on and missed all the HR issues and everything else. But I think it's also an opportunity for me to do this. There we go.
The gym.
The gym.
Which, by the way, if you go back and watch a bunch of our episodes, I feel like I gym a lot on this show.
You do. No, it's perfect. It's the perfect way to punctuate a point. I mean, right?
So the main character is Steve Carell's Michael Scott, who, when they started the show that first season, he's a lot more of a D-bag, and then they kind of soften him up. But he is an HR/legal nightmare. So let's, just like the Friends episode that we did, I think it's maybe easier to go by character than it is to try to, narratively weave this all together. So honestly, we could do an entire 4 episodes just on Michael himself.
Yeah.
We'll do another volume just like Friends, but let's start with some of the highlights of Michael. I want to start with, maybe this is one that gets called out a lot of Michael actually kind of committed a crime. This is the season 4 opener where he hit Meredith in the parking lot with his car. Now, not a crime per se, but looking at this footage, he's distracted. He's talking to a camera that is in his car, not looking what he's doing, and he doesn't just tap Meredith. No. He breaks her pelvis. She's in the hospital. When you saw that clip, what were your thoughts just as an attorney? Is that a personal injury lawyer's dream?
It is, but there's some legal issues that come into play because she was on the clock. So it's actually a workers' compensation claim rather than a personal injury claim. Now, if it had been on a Saturday and he hit her at the grocery store, then a broken pelvis is a huge personal injury lawsuit, and that's really terrible. But because it's in the company parking lot, she's really limited because she can file a workers' compensation claim. And the exceptions that my workers' comp attorney friends, looking at you, Callan, they will tell me that in order to break out of that, it's just so difficult to put it into a personal injury claim. What I found interesting rewatching it for the show is, we don't get a chance to see the cameras a lot. Every once in a while we see a camera, right? I mean, when they break character and whatever. But it seemed like most of the time they were old school, shoulder cams, going around. Thank goodness he wasn't, doing this. Because all of a sudden, and Doug Defense, you can order that on the T Public store. All of a sudden, now, I'm committing a crime. If I have my shoulder cam, the old school, video camera in there in the car with me,
not a crime.
Well, no, I mean it's distracted driving. And maybe you could get a ticket for distracted driving, but that's no different than having a Big Mac or putting on lipstick or any of the other things that people do when they're distracted. But if I have this phone in my hand and I'm actually filming myself and looking into it and doing all of that, now I am committing the crime of using a cell phone while driving.
And injuring someone.
That doesn't make as big of a difference.
Really?
Well, I mean,
I would think it would.
You would think,
yeah.
But it's then more likely to trigger criminal consequences because you've broken a vehicle code besides just plowing into somebody. But the times where traffic accidents become crimes are when somebody leaves the scene without sharing information. There's no indication that was here. That leaving the scene without giving information is a misdemeanor hit and run. Hurting someone and then leaving the scene without giving information is a felony. So that's the most serious level in there. If she were to pass away and they could show that it was because of distracted driving, then it's a vehicular manslaughter case.
Let me ask you this. Who's on the hook? Dunder Mifflin, because it's their parking lot, Michael, because he's the driver, or the production company for distracting Michael in the car?
Well, if we take it out of workers' comp land for a moment, and that happened on the Saturday filming of the show, then you sue everybody. I mean, you just hold everybody liable, and whoever has the deepest pockets loses.
Right.
I mean, that's generally how you would go about something like that. But I still think that everybody else potentially loses because it's pulled back into the workers' comp arena rather than being a personal injury lawsuit. So, it was so shocking. I mean, even rewatching it, for the show, like I'd forgotten just how floppy her body is, and
it's not a tap. It's a big hit.
Yeah.
But so this is Michael. He hasn't even made it into the building yet.
Right.
So now
right.
we're in the building. Let's talk about some of the things he's done in there. Season 3 opener, Gay Witch Hunt is the episode. So Michael makes a derogatory term to Oscar, who we find out is gay, and then Michael outs him to the entire office, which, I'm gonna pause there because more happens, but let's just pause right there.
Right.
Are we looking at more just like this is HR problem, or have we now shifted into legal? Because him and Dwight are looking at the office. Who else is secretly gay? And we're kind of, we're not would you call that discriminating?
I would call it a hostile work environment is what I would call it. And if we just paused right at that moment before it gets worse, and just Oscar just turns around and walks out, calls his friend an employment lawyer who sues people for discrimination. No question, he's got a lawsuit against Dunder Mifflin, Michael Scott individually, for outing him, for making it a hostile work environment for gay people, and he would win.
Yeah.
He would win a huge settlement. And then you can also look at protected classes, and we're really focused on the fact that, it's the episode where he outs him for being gay, but he's also Hispanic. And so there's potentially some overlapping into there. And then, I mean, my friends that do employment law, it just gets exhausting, because at that point you would not only bring in the conduct that day, but then you would show all of the inappropriate comments that he has ever made to Oscar prior to that moment, and all of that becomes part of the big lawsuit. If only we stop there and stop the bleeding at that point, which the producers did not choose to do.
We don't, because there's still about 10 minutes left of that episode. So you think, how is this going to get worse? So Michael calls everybody into the conference room, and to prove that he's not a bigot, he coerces Oscar into sharing a very inappropriate kiss.
Right. And it's so bad. I mean, I'm sorry. I started getting into it because I'm so ready for this.
Well, here's the thing. Oscar puts Michael in his place. Then, because Oscar's just a genuinely like a nice, I mean, most of that, that's why we watch this show. Even though they're all terrible, they're also all really nice and great.
Yeah.
And Oscar
except for maybe Dwight.
Even Dwight towards the
near
end.
the end, he does.
Yeah,
he
softens. But Oscar feels bad for putting Michael in his place.
Jeez.
I mean, do you almost have to throw this one out, because he does kind of consent to doing it?
It depends on where you pause, right? Because, like I said, if we paused before that moment, honestly, like rewatching it now, I almost wanted to cry for Oscar. I mean, there is a moment there where he says, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. I've never been so mortified in my life." And in that moment, I mean, this is where we can see that 20 years have passed. I mean, I mean, it wasn't acceptable then. It's even more unacceptable now. And yeah, he puts Michael in his place, but he puts Michael in his place by saying, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, and shame on you." Now, Michael then realizes that he's overstepped, and then he feels bad. So then he tries to kiss him. So then, as he's trying to forcibly kiss an employee, let's make it easier for our friends at home, and let's say that he did this to Pam. Right? So let's say that he decides in the middle of an office meeting to grab Pam Beasley and try to forcibly kiss her in front of the entire office. And first of all, I don't understand why there weren't people like jumping up to stop this from happening.
Because we're at season 3, and at this point, like, it's just Michael.
It's just Michael, but oh my God! Like if it were Pam, you know, we would be looking at that as an attempted sexual assault. You know, an unwanted kiss is a touching on an intimate part of a person's body, and it's a crime. Just straight out, it's a crime. So as he's holding Oscar and trying to, as soon as he puts his arm around Oscar with the intention to kiss him against his will, that's a crime right there.
But it's not against his will, because Oscar
at first it is, right? And then they break apart, and he realizes how horrible this is and everything else. And then because Michael shut the door. False imprisonment for a purpose of a sexual assault. Let's just call that what it is. But then, he opens the door, and then Michael goes to start to leave, and then Oscar closes the door. So now I think this is the point where we're talking about, which is, okay, so now Oscar's closed the door, and now Oscar is consenting to do this awkward kiss. And I would say that at that moment, Oscar closing the door and saying, bring it in. He doesn't actually say that, but I mean,
sure.
He's not comfortable with it, and then if he turns around and goes to his friendly neighborhood, employment lawyer who's going to sue Dunder Mifflin, he has every single aspect of that. I mean, we wouldn't be able to say the whole thing goes away because Oscar consented to it at the end. All of that was an awkward, uncomfortable, plus hostile work environment.
We talk about things changing in the last 20 years. This is also before the Me Too movement and talking about power dynamics. And maybe he felt like he had to for job security. We don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those arguments would be what any good employment lawyer would argue to sue the heck out of Dunder Mifflin and Michael Scott. So,
I mean, he ends up getting. I think Dunder Mifflin just offers Oscar, like, what do they give him, like a car and like a month vacation and all this stuff,
something like that. Yeah,
and just like, all right.
Well, sure. and then if he accepts those things and signs away, well, then he's waived his right to sue for those things, and arguably they've tried to make it right because they acknowledge how bad this is. In the one time that they tried to make it right.
So later on, since we're talking about sexual assault, let's keep going. Later on in the series, we find out that Michael has hired his nephew to work in the office. His nephew, played by Evan Peters. So funny. So great. He's a real jerk. And Michael and everyone at the office has just had enough of this guy. Michael disciplines him in the only way he sees fit, which is to bend him over and spank him.
Yes.
Go. No question. Just go.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same. I mean, the answer to almost every one of these questions is suing the heck out of Dunder Mifflin. I mean,
but would you consider this assault and battery, sexual assault? Because he is spanking his butt. Like, it is kind of weird.
And if I had to defend him, and I wouldn't, but if I had to defend him, I would argue that there wasn't a sexual intent, that somehow this was his. It was a battery, no question about it. I mean, it was hitting a person. I mean, if he slapped Toby in the face, that's a battery. I mean, as simple as that. And then all of the lawsuits that relate to that. The nephew could have had his uncle arrested and then sued the heck out of Dunder Mifflin.
Pam slaps Michael down the road. So remember, Michael dates Pam's mom.
Right.
Very upset.
Right.
Then he breaks up with her. She's even more upset. And he's like, do you want to hit me? And she's like, yep. And so he offers, like, you can hit me. And she backs out until he mouths off just a little too much, and she smacks him.
For the record, your mom came on to me.
Holy crap. Are you okay?
No!
Is Pam in that situation? First of all, they're outside, but I guess they're still in Dunder Mifflin property.
Yeah, I think.
But he also said she could do it.
Yeah, I think in that instance, I think that he has said, you can slap me. That's consent, and so I wouldn't have Pam on the hook for that, because he offered it, even though she backed away a bit. He was. I think he was trying to egg her on, honestly, to get her to slap him, because he wanted to use that as some sort of restitution for all of his bad things that he had done by dating her mom. So, easy to defend Pam Beasley on that one.
So there's kind of a lot of violence now that I think about it. Like, let's shift away from Michael, because now that we're on Pam is kind of involved in a couple altercations besides the slap. Another one that comes up is probably one of the most serious things that happens on this show, which is this is later on, I believe, in the final season 9, which is where she is creating an art mural in the warehouse. It is vandalized by one of the warehouse staff. She finds out who, so she takes water-based paint and paints his truck that he's very proud of, and he starts to come at her. Now, I sent you the clip. You saw the footage. The cameraman, which is, to your point, like, it's very rare we ever acknowledge the crew, steps in and he stops anything from happening. But as a lawyer, looking at that whole kind of scene, how it unfolded, what was kind of your take? Did you feel that was something where Brian, the cameraman, had every right to kind of assault that warehouse worker? What is Pam looking at? Because, she was retaliating, but she did paint on this guy's car and everything,
No, it's fascinating. I mean, it's like a law school exam fact pattern. It's just, it is a fascinating legal issue. So we start with, Pam had permission, if I remember correctly, to paint the mural in the warehouse.
Yes.
So that's company authorized artwork, right? Then the person that vandalizes it should have been fired, period. Right? If one of my employees writes, "Doug is a big jerk," on the wall in my office, I probably would also have them arrested for vandalism on the way out the door. But that's how I'm wired. So, my friends that work for me, don't spray "Doug is a jerk" on the wall. I'll have you arrested. But if we just paused it there again, Michael Scott could have that guy arrested, fired, done. Pay for damage to the
Michael's
mural.
it's Andy, I think is the
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, whoever it is, Dunder Mifflin could have that guy arrested for all of that. And so she gets mad. So, and period. Even though we know that there's this longer thing going on, that really stops the fact pattern for a little bit. Pam putting watercolor paint on the guy's truck, the question is there any damage to that, right? Vandalism requires damage. And, you can put like old-timey shoe polish or watercolor paints on windows. I mean, we do it for high school graduations and prom and things along those lines that intentionally they don't damage the car. And I certainly had the impression that the watercolor paint was something that he could just spray off with a hose. So I don't think Pam Beasley is good for vandalism of the truck.
But from my recollection, she did paint either like butts or something potentially obscene. Does that change anything?
Nah.
Okay.
Nah. Butts on things, which, by the way, they had a booth at Comic-Con. Butts on things. Like put a little butt on R2-D2, put a little butt on Minions. So shout out to Butts on Things.
Be careful if you Google that at work, because you might come back with some stuff that is
You
anyways.
might need my friends that are employment
or
lawyers.
you might be able to work for Dunder Mifflin.
Clearly. But really, at that point, that's not worse than the paint pens that we can write on the windows with. Now,
So-
if it scratched the paint, if it damaged the paint,
Right.
if as they were hosing it off, it left a ghost of a trail, or somehow it was permanent, then she is, then for sure. Whether she was retaliating for something bad that he did or not, there's not a self-defense vandalism of a truck, So, I mean, she doesn't get him back. It's a separate crime. And if there's damage to the paint, then she's good for vandalism. If it truly is just, I mean, if she had put flour all over his truck and he had to hose it off or made it super dirty and he had to hose it off, that's nothing but, that it's not a crime. I mean, at that point. But any measurable damage, and then she's good for vandalism. So then he comes at her. There's no question looking at the scene that the warehouse worker is coming at her to do harm. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. So Brian, the cameraman, going to protect Pam, we've talked about this in a few episodes. This is just classic defense of others. You have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to defend others who are in harm's way. And it doesn't seem like Brian, the cameraman's response is too harsh or over the top. He's literally trying to stop this guy from attacking Pam. And so I would absolutely defend Brian, the cameraman, and get him off 100%. The warehouse worker who's charging at Pam is potentially trying to assault Pam, not in a lewd way or anything like that, but he is coming at her. And a very, very low crime is an attempted battery, So if he was coming at her and saying, "I'm going to rip your head right off your body," now we're talking about a criminal threat that's a felony.
Yeah.
If he's just coming at her, which is what we saw in the footage, then technically, California Penal Code Section 240 makes it a crime to attempt to assault someone, attempt to batter someone. And we almost never see him filed because it's such a low-level thing. But in this case, it would probably apply.
Okay, so let's talk about, this isn't the only altercation that Pam is at least tangentially related to. You also talked about Brian's response being in line. Let's talk about when Roy said, "I'm going to get Jim Halpert.
I'm going to kill Jim Halpert."
And we start this episode, the very next episode, where he's pacing in the parking lot, which clearly he's thinking about it. So this is a premeditated attack. This is not, he could be as passionate as he wants, but he's thought about this.
Yeah.
He charges up into the Dunder Mifflin office. He says, "Hey, Halpert." And he starts to come towards Jim. And Dwight pepper sprays the crap out of him. So walk me through, would you consider Dwight's response to be kind of the same as Brian's in terms of like that was excessive or not? And then B, would you consider, you saw it, do you feel like Roy was coming to be like, "Hey, Halpert, you're a piece of crap"? Like, was he, or was he be like, "Hey, Halpert," and then getting a swing? Like, was there, it seems a lot more to me that the warehouse worker with Pam is very obvious that he's going to come to, at the very minimum, push her. Whereas Roy, I don't know, if I have to defend Roy, I could be like, he was just going to stand there and scream at him. I never saw any attempts at an attack.
Yeah. I think that there was enough of a fast movement towards Jim.
Right.
And the fact that he didn't say, "Hey, Jim, buddy, let's talk about, the fact that we both had crushes on Pam at some time." I mean, everything about his demeanor, everything about that. And that's only looking at what we, through the eyes of Jim.
I guess he does kind of charge a little.
He does charge. Yeah. So, but then we know we have video footage.
Right.
So we know that he's pacing in the parking lot and we can see what's going on. And if we're looking to try to defend or prosecute Roy, then the camera footage of him pacing outside in the parking lot is going to be super relevant about his intent as well.
Let me ask you, does it make it way worse that the very tag of the episode before that, he literally says, "I'm going to kill Jim Halpert"? He doesn't say like, "I'm going to kick his ass." He says, "Kill." Now, do I think Roy would have actually killed him? No. I don't.
So
but-
all of that comes into play.
Right.
All of that comes into play. If someone says, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to kill Jim Halpert, California Penal Code Section 422 deals with a criminal threat, but it has to be made to the person. It has to be something that's imminent. It has to be something that there's a genuine, realistic fear that somebody can actually make good with this, and so it's the amount of fear that you put the person into. We don't have any reason to believe that Roy's comment, I'm going to kill Jim Halpert, was communicated to Jim. We know the cameraman got it,
Right.
but we don't have any reason to believe it was communicated to Jim. So if I'm prosecuting Roy, I'm definitely going to want to use that footage from the end of the previous season to show what his intent was going in the room. Because he didn't successfully come into contact with Jim, it's all going to be about an attempt crime, and you have to show his specific intent. And when we have him on camera saying, I'm going to kill Jim Halpert, and we have him on camera pacing back and forth outside in the parking lot, and then we have him rushing towards Jim, that sets up everything that we're going to do. Now, I don't know that if I was a prosecutor, I would go so far as to say attempted murder. It's maybe somebody who's super aggressive.
There nuance, but
there is.
Okay, because like, how many times be like, oh, I'm gonna kill that person? It's like you're not really gonna kill them. You're just angry,
True. I will give some professional legal advice to anyone listening.
Okay.
Don't say I'm going to kill you. Don't say it. Just don't say it. And also don't kill people. So there we go. I'm pretty comfortable giving those two bits of legal advice.
Okay.
Because anybody who hears, "Oh, I'm gonna kill that person," I've had clients come in and say, "Oh, I was just blowing off steam. I didn't really mean it." It doesn't matter. It's a crime to say words that come across as an imminent threat that creates reasonable fear in the mind of your victim. And that in and of itself, it's a felony. It's a serious violent felony here in California. So people go to prison for just the words. I had someone who made a threat in an office and said, I'm coming back here and I'm blowing this place up. And when she came back, she was arrested for criminal threats. I mean, all she did was say she was going to do it, but your words do have actions or do have consequences.
It's possible she was just going to Taco Bell and she was just saying, when I come back, I'm going to have tummy troubles and just,
right.
Really
I'm going to kill it.
I'm going to blow that toilet up.
Right. Maybe. And,
but,
and maybe that's the whole thing. I mean, I think that Roy is definitely good for an attempted assault.
What about Dwight's response with the pepper spray?
Totally reasonable.
Even though everyone around him also kind of felt the wrath of that pepper spray?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because, it wasn't the most artful thing, and that's what we were designed to feel, right? And like, oh, he messed up and got himself and got Pam and got Jim and got everybody. But he also stopped Jim from being beat. And at the bare minimum, Jim was going to be beat. Now, would he have been, punched in the stomach, and would that have been as bad as having burny eyes? I don't, I don't know. But I would all day, every day defend Dwight's decision to spray Roy. This was one of those moments in the show too, where we had like it's not cringy. It's like a real sense of danger.
Yes.
And that was unusual for the show.
Yeah, especially at that time. That was like the first real, like, oh my God, something dramatic's going to happen.
So this was during the time that we were becoming a lot more aware of workplace violence as well. And it was something that was becoming... it wasn't just Becky's blowing off steam. It's we have to take this seriously because people were getting hurt and people were losing their minds and people were committing serious crimes in the workplace. And so this moment in this show hits very different than any other moment.
Well, it's kind of the thing about The Office is you can play these same types of things, one very serious like this, and then one that's an equally serious scenario, but played entirely for laughs because this would not be the last time that Dwight's weapon collection would come out. So let's fast forward a little bit to when Dwight is the acting manager of Dunder Mifflin.
Right.
He puts on his little gun belt. He has a gun that he accidentally fires in the office.
Someone get me a banana. Sorry I freaked you guys out.
Andy!
Ah! God! It's so loud!
After everyone tells him, like, that's making me very uncomfortable, he accidentally misfires it. Andy claims to have hearing damage. Daryl, my favorite line is, "Why are you limping?" And Dwight tries to be like, howdy, I'm Sheriff Dwight. And he's like, I can't do this. So like, I'm not, sometimes I feel like I ask these questions as if I'm like so obtuse. It's like, I know that you cannot fire a gun in the workplace, but let's look at the context.
Yeah.
This is not Roy coming in with a firearm,
Right.
shooting.
Ooh, can you imagine if you just like
very different show, by the way.
point blank?
Yeah, very different show. But Law and Order Scranton, you know.
Dunk dunk.
Michael Scott. Dong dong. So Dwight having the gun, let's just assume he has a license or a permit for that gun anyway. But bringing a gun, even if you have a permit, to the workplace, what are we looking at there? And then that gun accidentally going off, even if it doesn't hit anybody.
Right.
What are we looking at there?
No, thanks. And I the nuance that I loved about this sequence too is Dwight's hip placement. and he's just like shifting his hip like the whole time so that he can have like the gun be the closest thing to the employees' bodies as he's going through. And it's beyond cringy. And the employees take it really seriously too. I mean, they're like, hey, this is making me really uncomfortable. In this workplace, for the employees to actually utter those words, it's got to be bad, right? So taking a gun into the workplace, I'm not sure at this time what the open carry laws are for guns in Scranton, Illinois.
Pennsylvania.
So, but that totally changes things. I did all this work on the other Scranton. I'm just kidding.
I was going to
It's
say,
fine.
is there another
Scranton?
Scranton?
I don't know. Anyway, so I have not done a lot of work about what the open carry laws are in Scranton, Pennsylvania, around this time. Sure. But if this were today, and if this were California, California does not have an open carry allowance. So bringing a gun anywhere that's loaded is a felony.
Okay.
Bringing a gun into the workplace doesn't make it necessarily substantially worse. But on the other hand, I, as the business owner, can have a firearm in my own office in the same way that I can have a firearm in my own home. But extending that to employees and extending that to other people it doesn't work. It's
now,
just,
my Office fans, big Office fans, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if at this point in the story, we do know that eventually Dwight does own the entire building.
Right.
So he is the building owner.
right.
I don't know if he is in this episode. I can't remember, but
Well, and that would make a little bit of a difference. You know, if he's the landlord for Dunder Mifflin, then he's allowed to have a firearm there. Ugh. It gets really sticky, though, with the whole open carry thing, and then that being a kind of public workplace. I mean, you can have a firearm in the office, in the business place that you own, but you're not going to be able to carry it, especially on your hip, out to Burger King, you know. So, but again, this is very state specific, and there are people that really don't like the fact that California has this restriction that you can't Dwight it up and have, you know, a revolver on your hip walking around.
what could go wrong?
I know what could go wrong, but there are a lot of states that prefer these open carry, rules, and you got people walking around cowboy style with guns. So then, that deals with the possession aspect of it. It's clearly loaded. So I think we're looking at felonies for Dwight unless we can carve out some sort of a exception for him being the landlord.
Okay.
But
wait, there's more.
So it's a crime to negligently discharge a firearm. Period. So even though it's an accident, it's not like he's intending to use it. It's not like he's intending for it to go off, anything along those lines. An accidental discharge of a firearm really happens only because someone is negligent in some way. It's really, really hard to obey every single safety rule and have a gun just randomly accidentally go off.
Sure.
I mean, he hit the trigger or whatever it was that he did. He pulled it out and accidentally, but negligently fired it. I mean, he, especially with all the farming training that he's had, at Schrute Farms,
right?
I mean, those beats can't help themselves. I don't know why I said that. The fire, but I mean, he should know how to remove a firearm from a holster without hitting the trigger to then have it go off. So it is a crime, negligent discharge of a firearm. We're working on a couple of those cases right now as we speak.
Will you cite this in your defense?
Maybe like, please reference Doug Defend's video on The Office episode at minute 7. Anyway, but then there's the other part of it, right? Which is Andy, and we're made to believe that Andy has been shot, and reasonably so. We hear the gun go off, and Andy flinches and moves and over dramatizes the fact that his ear hurts. I mean, whatever. I've never had a gun go off unexpectedly right next to my
loud,
ear.
I guess,
So maybe it's
Linda
super painful.
Hamilton has permanent hearing damage from not putting her plugs in the scene in Terminator 2 where they're firing in the elevator. So there you go.
Well, that makes sense, and I did not know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's for the gram.
There you go.
There we go.
On the Office episode.
On the Office episode.
Makes a lot of sense.
So, regardless, we're initially made to think that he has had a bullet enter his body, right? And it turns out that it hasn't. And it turns out that Andy, the singer, who's super sensitive about singing, nothing. I love, and that cracks me up. But putting the Andy-ness of that moment aside, I don't remember how that concludes. I don't remember if he goes to the hospital and he's all clear,
I think that's
or
just the joke's over
and the gag's over and we don't have a follow-up. But let's say for a second that Dwight's negligent actions ended up causing Andy's eardrum to rupture. Well, all of a sudden now, there is still the crime of the negligent discharge of the firearm. There is and I want to keep it with the ear just for a second rather than a bullet entering body, because that's a different analysis. So if Andy's eardrum is punctured, I don't know that changes the criminal charges that we would bring against Dwight. Technically, then it's a negligence discharge of a firearm that caused a serious bodily injury, because, I mean, popping an eardrum is serious. It's not great bodily injury, but it's serious bodily injury. And then, and it hurts. But I do think that all of those circumstances pull it out of workers' comp mode. And I think that Andy has full-blown lawsuit now against Dunder Mifflin and against Dwight Schrute. And I think that his injury then becomes a major part of it. And, he can't sing in his a cappella quartet anymore because
here comes trouble.
I mean, because he's off a little bit. And so I think that's how we see that play out for Andy.
Dwight shoots his gun. Andy injured.
Right.
Debatable. But then later on in the last season, Dwight brings another kind of gun to the office, and this is very deliberate. Dwight is he's given up on his dreams of management. He needs to nail this sale. He needs Stanley. Stanley says, I'm not going. This was during Staremageddon.
Yes.
Where the elevator wasn't working. So he shoots Stanley with the tranquilizer dart, slides his body down the stairs. His head crashes through the wall. They drug him. Stanley, though, at the end, for what it's worth, seems really happy that they made the sale and says, well, I'm not climbing up those stairs, so you better tranquilize me again and get me back up there. What are we talking here? Clark the whole time is just like, I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, yeah. He is at least kind of the voice of reason, but he's the perfect intern where he's going along with the authority figures in the company.
Sure.
So, it's understandable. Rewatching this for today just made me cringe so hard. I mean, what's crazy is the first dart doesn't do it, right? And Stanley's still moving towards Dwight, and now he's got two more. So I mean, arguably, is the first dart a crime, and then the next two are self-defense? I don't know, but he shoots three darts in that are designed to take down a bull, and Stanley goes down. So that's
Stanley, who, by the way, we know has health issues because he had a heart attack earlier in the show,
and
diabetes.
Right, right. It's an assault. It's an assault. What I don't get from this projectile weapon is that I don't think it's gunpowder based, which actually makes a difference.
Okay. It seems like it's like an air cannon.
It does. It seems like a CO2 cartridge kind of a deal, which is a completely different classification of weapon than a gunpowder explosion, combustible, firearm that shoots bullets. So, but still, it's an assault. I mean,
right.
Even if it was just, even if it didn't have the trank in it, just shooting a dart into somebody is an assault.
Okay, so we've covered Dwight and his weapons. Now there's one thing that Michael and Dwight do together, which is another one where everyone's like, hey, this is pretty bad. Michael's very upset that he was not invited to the launch of Dunder Mifflin Infinity Party. He orders pizzas for everybody back at the office. He has a real justice complex problem, and he's very upset with the pizza delivery boy and kind of kidnaps him, keeps him there against his will. Mm-hmm. Thoughts?
Yeah. I like that. I love that that's the setup for almost everything. It's just kind of like discuss.
Thoughts?
Thoughts? It's crime. Yeah, it's so the difference between kidnapping and false imprisonment is narrow. Okay.
Sure.
So it's force. So I'm trying to remember in that scene whether or not Dwight physically moves him into the conference room or whether they just close the door and decide not to let him out. But that's going to make the difference.
Okay.
So if looking at it again, if we see Dwight moving the guy across and placing him in the conference room, I mean, it's never violent, but I mean, if we have him,
Even
moving
if he
him,
gently guides him. Or
if
puts
it's gently guides, then the defense of Dwight is going to be it wasn't actually force. So I mean, that's what I would use for the defense of Dwight, is it wasn't actually force. So therefore, it's only false imprisonment, which is still pretty bad. So best case scenario, Michael and Dwight have a co-conspirator, co-defendant. They, at best, falsely imprisoned the pizza guy. But also, I think that there's a way to resolve it short of what they did there. And, if they called their friendly neighborhood criminal defense attorney in that very moment and said, I think we crossed the line, I would say, absolutely, you crossed the line. Pay the pizza guy $500, make him happy so he doesn't report you to the police, and just say, really sorry, having a really bad day. Here's $500. Does that make it right? and send him on his way. I mean, I would.
He's a young kid. I would think $500. Sure.
I would think
Yeah.
like, hey, can we agree to just handle this and everything else, and that's what I would advise him to do.
So there's a lot that, like we said, we just don't have time to cover everything. Like obviously Ryan goes to jail for fraud.
So good.
Kind of self-explanatory
Yeah.
what happens there, but I do want to get to some of these fan questions.
Yeah, really good fan questions.
I love this question so much. Joe asks, if you had to take one of them as a client,
Ooh.
which one are you going to take? Date Mike or prison Mike?
Oh my gosh.
You have to take one of them
I
as a
have
client.
to take one.
Yep.
Oh. This is so tough because I'm going to take Date Mike. Because I would rather deal with the vandalism of the pool table, the all of that part of it, the awkwardness. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the worst awkwardness. There's damage to the pool table potentially. There's damage. He knocks over the tray. There's that. All of that entire sequence is potentially property damage to the bar, and then he gets ejected. And and so maybe it's a disturbing the peace combined with, maybe some vandalism. Maybe.
But here's the thing, though. Date Mike is never going to listen to anything you tell him to do. So even if he gets charged with something small, he's going to make it worse for himself in court.
Oh, that's why we keep the clients home.
Prison Mike, we know that he's kidnapped the president's daughter. He's never been caught, but he got caught. He's been through the system. He might know better. He might listen to you more than Date Mike.
Great arguments all. I would be a whole lot more comfortable dealing with the guy that's awkward on a date who actually commits some crimes, who might not listen to me, but that's okay. I just take the hat off, and then he would revert back to Michael Scott, and he would probably listen to the lawyer, because apparently the hat is the key to Date Mike's transformation. Prison Mike is just I just can't do it with the bandana and the cultural appropriation at best. Just being out and out racist at worst. So it just. I just can't. I don't want anything to do with Prison Mike.
Because you don't want to be followed. You don't want to be followed by the Dementors, do you?
Right, exactly.
You got a good life.
Yeah, it's so bad. It's so horrible.
All right, Bill, our friend Bill,
Yeah.
from the Rebooted podcast.
Yeah.
Yes. What would be the quickest way to get Angela arrested just because she sucks?
I love this question. And I think we can all agree Angela sucks. And the problem is that the answer to this question, I'm trying to figure out a better way of doing it. But there's one thing that can get Angela riled up more than anything. Mm-hmm. And that's her cat.
Mm-hmm.
Sprinkles. So I would say kidnap Sprinkles.
I mean, Dwight euthanizes Sprinkles without her permission, which is its own problem. I'm sure.
And that I'm sure will come up in volume 2 of our episode. but I think kidnapping Mr. Sprinkles is what pushes Angela right over the edge. And again, cat lovers at home, I'm not saying harm Sprinkles, lovingly, carefully kidnap Sprinkles. Spa day for Sprinkles at whatever. I mean, please don't, cat people, please don't start. Kidnap Sprinkles, push Angela just over the edge, and just whatever ends up happening. She just loses her mind and like starts slapping people or like charges through or just punches somebody in the stomach because she thinks that they're the person that kidnapped Sprinkles. And I mean, that's the way to break Angela, is to kidnap Sprinkles.
Because the thing is, for most of the show, she's a jerk.
Yes.
But as we talk about in the show, it's not illegal to be a jerk.
Yes.
Unless creating some sort of... I mean, she's very hostile with Phyllis.
Right.
But then Phyllis kind of blackmails her with
right.
when she finds out about... So it's like, look, I love almost every character in The Office. Almost every character in The Office should probably be in jail.
Yes, agreed. And I mean, I had forgotten about the Phyllis thing because I'm super focused on Bill's question, which is how do we set up Angela?
Sure.
And so that's where my wicked mind went to, just because she sucks. But I mean, even as Phyllis is blackmailing her, she doesn't really lose her cool. Maybe something in the party planning area could also trigger her enough where she crosses the line and just absolutely loses her cool. But
I mean, if Phyllis puts up another Lanch party,
just
banner,
one more, she's gonna lose her mind.
All right, this question comes from Bob. He says, when Creed gets arrested in the final episode, that's kind of the last thing we see of Creed is he's presumed dead, I think, or he's been hiding out in the Dunder Mifflin office this whole time. He gets taken away. What would be a fair jail sentence for tax evasion?
So, beautifully, I get to use my favorite lawyer answer, which is it depends. Now, we've had some fun recently, a few months back, with our Batman episode.
Right.
And we talked about disappearing yourself not being a crime.
Sure.
So maybe Creed is Bruce Wayne.
It's entirely unlikely.
Bat Creed is something I didn't think I was going to say this morning when I woke up. It depends on how much he's done, right? I mean, he gets arrested and taken away, and is it just for knowing Creed? It's not entirely clear if it's just for the tax evasion or if it's for the body in the fridge or, the
number of horrifying things that come out of his mouth.
Exactly. I mean, so it's really impossible to say what would be fair for Creed. If at the end of the day, the only thing that Creed did wrong was I can't believe I just set it up that way. If the only thing that Creed did wrong was fake his death and not pay taxes for a handful of years, there's potentially, people go to jail for that. I mean, we've seen celebrities not pay their taxes for a while and go to jail for that. And then again, are we talking the entire season, which is what, 10 years worth of 9 years worth of tax evasion?
Yeah.
Are we talking before that? Are we talking 20 years? Are we talking about the last two? Because all of those variables are gonna play a role.
Yeah.
You can get charged with tax evasion, and most of the time, whether it's a state prosecutor or a federal prosecutor, what they're interested in is getting that money back. So my strategy always with cases like that, where someone has taken money that they shouldn't, which arguably is what Creed has done, right? He hasn't paid the government their fair share of taxes, is to make restitution for that. Yeah. And typically making restitution for that lowers it down.
Okay, last question here. Dr. T. Marie P. wants to know, when Jim puts Dwight's stapler in Jell-O, is this vandalism? Is this anything worth? I mean, they as the show goes on, these pranks get more and more and more. Like, I feel like Jim could potentially. And we'll talk about some of them in the next time we do this. But for the Jell-O,
I think if we're just talking the Jell-O and the stapler, then first of all, I don't know whether that was Dwight's actual stapler or whether it was a company stapler. So I don't know that Dwight has standing.
Knowing Dwight, it's probably his personal
If he went
stapler.
out and got his personal stapler, if there was damage to it, then yes, that's vandalism. You know what? You get one of those at Staples for $5, maybe $20 if it's a super nice one. So that's not going to be anything that anybody's going to file charges on Jim for. There's a lot of other things that they could file on
Dwight
Jim for.
would, if he could.
Dwight would if he could. I don't think Dwight's going to get the attention of the police department enough to get something going there.
The Lackawanna Lackawanna County Sheriff's Department.
I'm impressed.
All right, this is the speed round.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so look, we're not going to go through every character. We'll talk about the characters. For Bill's sake, Angela, for just being a terrible person.
For Angela, for being a terrible person, I'm never going to defend her, Bill. So never, ever. I'm never going to defend her. And I'm going to help you frame her for crimes.
Good answer.
Yeah.
All right. Roy, for
Ooh.
charging at Jim. He was fired, so it was handled internally. As far as I know, no actual charges were pressed. But if they were,
the emotional part of this for me is getting in the way of potentially a decent case. If I had somebody who came to me who wasn't Roy, who wasn't the guy who was hurting my hero Jim, I would probably take it. It's a workplace case where he certainly got his just rewards, and I have successfully argued that to try to bring down charges before. So I'd probably do it if it wasn't Roy, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to get past, the fact that I would have a conflict of interest because I feel so passionately about Pam and Jim because they're so cute.
all right. How about the other warehouse worker that storms Pam?
Yeah. And I think for the same reasons, somebody who got his truck vandalized and gets arrested for charging the employee that did it, that's a pretty easy case for me to work on. And we figure out how to get that resolved and plea bargain down to something reasonable. But I start thinking about, him hurting Sweetie Pam, and I have a hard time with it. But I could probably defend that guy.
So then I'm going to guess you're probably going to take Brian, the sound guy. Should
Oh
the other
yeah.
guy.
Oh no, Brian. He's a goddamn hero.
All right, let's check Jim Halpert for mischief against Dwight. I mean, should any of those pranks actually warrant any sort of criminal activity?
Yeah, all day, every day, I'm going to represent Jim, and I think we've already established that I make some of my representations on emotional attachments,
Sure.
and that's just how it goes. But I think the argument that everything is pranks, there's that one sequence at one point where they line up all the pranks together, or they line up all the fake
Right.
complaints together all in one, and that does definitely start to stack up. But yeah, I'm going to represent Jim.
Okay, so Dwight Schrute.
Dwight Schrute.
For firing a gun, shooting Stanley with the tranquilizer, helping Michael false imprison the pizza boy. What are you going to take this case?
Oh, Dwight's so much harder because there's earnest Dwight and then there's pain in the neck Dwight. I mean, earnest Dwight, I feel like would at some point, season 9 Dwight would at some point acknowledge his wrongdoing and move forward. Season 2 Dwight would be the worst client ever.
Yep.
Yeah, but the one that marries Angela is the one that I could see representing and see talking some sense into and working and working out a deal. If it's season 2 Dwight, and I'm going to know that in the first conversation, no way in hell. Just absolutely not, because he just won't follow my advice, and he thinks that he's smarter than everyone else, and those are the worst kinds of
We
clients.
didn't even talk about how he caused Stanley a heart attack.
Right.
That is volume 2.
Definitely.
All right. For hitting Meredith with his car, for outing Oscar and also potentially sexually assaulting him, for kidnapping the pizza boy, for we didn't even talk about framing Toby with the oregano.
Oh, that's right.
Just for Michael Scott comes to you, he's like, "Hey, I kind of messed up on a lot of things. Are you gonna defend Michael Scott in court?"
So the key for Michael Scott is the fact that I am a criminal defense attorney and not an employment defense attorney, because I would absolutely represent Michael Scott as a criminal defense attorney. I think that he has a good heart, a good core, and I will also point to the inevitable employment lawsuits, multiple employment lawsuits that he has going on, and argue to the prosecutor, come on, let's try to get all of this put into employment court where it's supposed to be in the civil courts rather than in criminal court, and I would be successful with that. And if we were looking at his employment law case and doing that, if I was to send that to one of my friends, it would be a big one.
That's what she said. Ah, there it is. Well, like we said a billion times already, there's got to be a volume 2 of this.
For sure.
So much is still left on the table to talk about. Let us know in the comments which moments from The Office you want us to talk about. hit us up right here. We'll take a look at it. You can follow us on social media on TikTok, Instagram. We're also, if you want Dog on the Go, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. Like, comment, turn those notifications on because you don't want to miss new episodes of Doug Defends every Monday. Doug,
I got to get back to the office.
something beautiful about it. We'll see you guys next time.
That's what she said.
Michael, please.
There he is.
Please.
Mwah!
There he is. Come on.